There are moments in the long history of human thought, moments when myth, poetry, and psychology meet in a way so profound that we sense they are touching the very roots of the soul. One such moment appears in Jung's study of the hymn of creation, an ancient Vedic hymn from India, a song written thousands of years ago, a song that dares to ask the ultimate questions. Where did the universe come from? What existed before creation itself? And who, if anyone, knows the truth of beginnings? Now, most ancient scriptures try to give definite answers. They offer stories of gods and worlds, explaining the mystery of existence with clear images and sacred narratives. But the hymn of creation is different. It does not claim certainty. It does not tell us exactly who created the world, or even if such knowledge is possible. Instead, it leaves us standing before the unknown, with wonder, with humility, and with questions that have no simple answers. This tone of mystery, this honest recognition of not knowing, deeply fascinated Carl Jung. For in these ancient verses, he heard not dogma, but the living voice of the questioning human soul. Jung did not approach the hymn as a historian, nor as a theologian. He approached it as a psychologist, as someone who believed that the images and words of ancient texts are also reflections of the human psyche. The question of creation, then, is not only about the birth of the universe out there, but also about the birth of consciousness in here. Within the depths of the mind, the hymn begins by describing a state before the world came into being. It speaks of a time when there was neither being nor non-being, neither death nor immortality, neither night nor day. This is not easy to imagine. A reality before all opposites, before all distinctions. Yet Jung recognized this image. He compared it to the primal unconscious, that deep ocean of psyche, where nothing is yet separated, where all possibilities lie hidden, undifferentiated, silent, waiting. Think of the state of the newborn child, before it has words, before it knows the boundaries between self and world. Everything flows together, light and dark, inside and outside. Or think of our own dreams, when contradictions live side by side, when time and space lose their ordinary shape, and impossible things are suddenly real. This is the world of the unconscious. It is timeless, paradoxical, and filled with latent energy. And so, the Vedic hymn's vision of a time before opposites mirrors exactly what Jung discovered in psychology, that consciousness is born out of a formless depth. Then comes a turning point in the hymn. It speaks of desire, arising in the midst of the void. Desire, it says, was the first seed of mind. For Jung, this line was of extraordinary importance. It revealed that even in the most ancient human texts, there was an intuition that psychic energy, what he called the libido, is the force that stirs creation into movement. Desire is not merely a physical urge. It is longing, striving, yearning, the movement of life toward form and meaning. It is desire that separates light from darkness, that calls being out of non-being, that awakens the potential of consciousness. And in our own inner lives, it is desire that gives birth to growth. It is longing that pulls us out of unconscious sleep, that makes us question, search, and strive toward transformation. Jung saw that the hymn, though it spoke in the language of gods and cosmos, was also speaking of the human soul. The act of creation is not only universal, it is also personal. For each of us, consciousness had to be born. Our inner world had to rise out of the vast sea of the unconscious. And at the very root of that awakening was a spark, a seed, a yearning for life, for meaning, for awareness. Thus, when Jung read the hymn of creation, he did not only hear the echo of ancient priests, he heard the murmur of the psyche itself, wondering about its own birth, its own mystery, its own origin. And so, already in the opening lines of the hymn, we find a map of the psyche, a primordial darkness where all opposites rest, a stirring of desire that awakens creation, and the first breath of consciousness, born out of mystery and longing. As the hymn of creation unfolds, After the silence of the primordial void, after the stirring of desire in the depths, there arises something new. The world of opposites begins to appear. From the formless womb of nothingness, the first contrasts emerge. Light and darkness, being and non-being, male and female, life and death. It is as if creation itself could only happen by dividing unity into two. And Jung, reading these lines, recognized a truth that psychology also confirms. The birth of consciousness always comes through the tension of opposites. The hymn tells us that in the beginning, there was no clear separation. All things were mingled, held together in a single undifferentiated whole. But then came the act of distinction, the cutting apart, the drawing of a line, the birth of polarity. This was not a fall from grace, but the very condition of creation. Without night there is no day. Without death there is no life. Without shadow there is no light. Jung often spoke of this principle in his psychology. He called it the enantiodromia, the tendency of all things to turn into their opposite. Life contains death. Growth contains decay. Order hides chaos. And chaos hides the seed of order. The hymn of creation seems to whisper this same secret, that existence is woven of pairs, and that the energy of life is born out of their tension. Think of a spark. It is only created when two poles of energy meet. So too in the psyche, the clash between conscious and unconscious, between instinct and reason, between desire and restraint, is what gives birth to growth. In the hymn's imagery, this play of opposites takes on cosmic scale. It is not only man and woman, not only light and dark, it is the very principle of the universe. And yet Jung shows us that the same principle operates within us. Each human being carries within these polarities, and the path of individuation, the path toward wholeness, is not the denial of one side, but the union of both. The hymn of creation suggests that even the gods, if there were gods in the beginning, might not fully know the origin. It asks, who truly knows how creation began? Perhaps even the highest gods do not know. Perhaps only the one who sees all knows. Or perhaps even he does not. In these questions, Jung hears not doubt but wisdom. The hymn is telling us that the opposites, knowledge and ignorance, certainty and uncertainty, also belong together. To live with mystery, to carry the unknown alongside the known, is part of the human condition. Jung observed that many myths echo this pattern. In Greek mythology, chaos gives birth to Gaia, and from Gaia comes sky. Heaven and earth, male and female, are born together. In Egyptian myth, the waters of Nun, endless and undifferentiated, give rise to Adam, who then separates sky from earth, light from darkness. The hymn of creation belongs to this same lineage of thought. It tells us that opposites were not invented by humans later. They were present at the very dawn of existence. And here Jung draws the connection to psychology. He reminds us, the unconscious contains all opposites in unity, but when consciousness emerges, it emerges by taking sides, by separating I from not I, self from world, good from bad. This separation is necessary, but it also creates conflict. For the other half, the denied, the rejected, does not vanish. It remains in the shadow. So when the hymn describes the birth of creation as a division into pairs, Jung hears the voice of the psyche itself. He sees the archetypal pattern that repeats in every human life. To become conscious is to divide, but to become whole is to reunite. And so the opposites are not enemies. They are partners in a greater mystery. Thus, in this stage of the hymn of creation, we glimpse the eternal law of polarity. It is the law that governs cosmos and psyche alike, the law that gives birth to life through tension, and guides the soul toward transformation, through the reconciliation of opposites. As the hymn of creation moves deeper, after the stillness of the void, after the awakening of desire, after the birth of opposites, there comes another theme, the theme of sacrifice. For creation is not only about division, it is also about offering, about giving something up, so that something greater may arise. The hymn suggests in veiled words that the universe was shaped through a primordial act, a gesture that gave order to chaos. It is as though the cosmos itself was built on the mystery of surrender. Jung reflects on this with great care. In myth after myth, in culture after culture, we encounter the same symbol. The world is born out of a sacrifice. In Indian tradition, there is the myth of Purusha, the cosmic being who was sacrificed by the gods, his body divided, to become the heavens, the earth, the animals, the seasons, and even the castes of society. In Norse mythology, the giant Ymir is slain, and from his flesh and bones, the world is formed. In Christianity, Christ himself becomes the sacrificial figure, whose death opens the way to renewal, whose blood is seen as the seed of eternal life. Why, Jung asks, does the human psyche again and again imagine creation as sacrifice? The answer lies deep in the structure of the unconscious. To bring forth new life, something old must be surrendered. To awaken to new consciousness, an old form of self must die. This law of death and rebirth is not just cosmic, it is psychological. Every transformation requires a letting go. Every step into maturity asks for the sacrifice of childish illusions. Every step toward wholeness requires the death of a narrow identity, so that a broader self may be born. The hymn of creation hints at this pattern, though it does not give a detailed myth, points toward the idea that order, life, and meaning were established through a primal act of offering. And Jung hears in this the voice of archetype, the same voice that speaks in every story of dying gods and rising worlds. Imagine for a moment the inner world of the psyche. When we cling too tightly to an outdated image of ourselves, we remain stuck. The unconscious begins to pressure us, to disturb us with dreams, with fantasies, with crises. And in these moments, what is being asked of us is sacrifice. The ego must release its old form, its rigid certainty, so that something new may be born out of the depths of the unconscious. This is why Jung saw sacrifice as a universal psychological law, not a literal blood offering, but the symbolic sacrifice of the old self, the willingness to descend into uncertainty, to surrender what we thought we were, in order to become more fully what we truly are. The hymn's suggestion of cosmic order, emerging from sacrifice, also resonated with Jung's view of individuation. For individuation is not smooth or easy. It often feels like dismemberment, like parts of the self are being torn away. But in truth, this painful process is the way by which a greater harmony is created. Just as the cosmic body of Purusha was divided to give shape to the world, so too the fragments of our inner life must be reassembled into a new order. The hymn also raises a subtle question. Was this sacrifice intentional? Was it guided by a divine will? Or did creation unfold of its own accord, without plan, without architect, through the mysterious workings of necessity? Jung loved this ambiguity. He saw in it the reflection of the psyche itself, which often moves according to laws that the ego cannot fully grasp. Creation, whether of worlds or of selves, is never entirely conscious. It arises from depths beyond our control, and yet it leads toward form, toward meaning, toward order. Thus, in this stage of the hymn of creation, we are given a profound truth. Creation is not only birth, it is also sacrifice. Every beginning hides an ending. Every renewal requires surrender. And every act of becoming demands that we let something go. And so Jung teaches us, through the mirror of this hymn, that the cosmos and the soul alike are woven out of sacrifice. It is a law that we cannot escape, but also a law that opens the path to growth, to transformation, to wholeness. After the hymn speaks of sacrifice, after it hints at the surrender that makes creation possible, it turns again toward something more subtle. something even more mysterious, the power of desire. The verses tell us that desire was the first stirring, the primal movement within the stillness of the void. It was the seed of thought, the first vibration of the cosmic mind. And for Jung, this was no mere poetic image. He saw in these words a profound psychological truth. For what is desire if not energy? It is that invisible impulse that pushes life forward, that awakens consciousness, that drives the human soul to search for meaning. In his psychology, Jung often spoke of libido. Now, in everyday language, libido is confused with sexuality, but Jung used the term in a much wider sense. For him, libido was not just sexual instinct. It was the totality of psychic energy. It is the energy that moves us to love, to create, to destroy, to build, to imagine. It is the inner fire that fuels myths, art, religion, and the slow work of individuation. When the hymn of creation says, that desire was the first seed of mind, Jung recognized this as an intuition, that psychic energy lies at the root of everything. Before form there was movement. Before order there was longing. Before consciousness there was the stirring of will. And this longing, this reaching toward, was the beginning of both cosmos and psyche. Let us pause here for a moment and feel what this means on a personal level. Think of your own life. Every transformation you have undergone, every new chapter, every leap of growth, began with a spark of desire. The desire to change, to move, to know, to become. Sometimes it felt like a hunger. Sometimes like a restless unease. Sometimes like a dream too powerful to ignore. But always it was desire, the movement of energy within, that called something new into being. The hymn, then, is not speaking only of creation long ago. It is describing what happens every moment. In the depths of the psyche, for each of us, there is still a void, a chaos, a darkness of what is not yet formed. And from that darkness, desire arises again, whispering of possibilities, longing for transformation. But there is another dimension to this. The hymn does not only speak of desire, it also speaks of cosmic order. Creation was not left in chaos. It was shaped, arranged, woven into a pattern. And Jung understood this too. He knew that the psyche does not only contain energy, it also has a hidden tendency toward form, toward balance, toward meaning. In psychology, this tendency is what Jung called the movement toward the self. The self is the totality of the psyche, the center that both conscious and unconscious, the wholeness that lies behind every fragment of our life. Just as the cosmos was shaped into order, so too the psyche seeks its own inner order. Desire without order becomes chaos. Energy without form becomes destruction. But desire shaped by meaning, energy guided toward the self, becomes transformation. The hymn's vision of cosmic order reminds us of the great archetype, found in countless myths: the world tree, the cosmic pillar, the axis mundi, the center that holds the universe together. In Norse myth it is Yggdrasil, the tree that unites heaven, earth and underworld. In Hindu thought it is Mount Meru, the axis around which the cosmos turns. In alchemy it is the lapis, the philosopher's stone, the symbol of inner order and wholeness. Jung saw all these as variations of the same symbol, the human longing for a center, a principle of order, that can guide the chaos of the unconscious into meaning. But the hymn also carries a paradox. It asks, who truly knows the origin of all things? Perhaps even the gods do not know. Perhaps only the one who sees beyond knows. Or perhaps even he does not. This profound uncertainty is itself a kind of wisdom. It tells us that cosmic order is real, but its source may forever remain a mystery. And Jung agrees. The psyche strives for wholeness, but the origin of this drive lies in depths we cannot fully understand. We can follow its path, but the source of its energy, the ultimate ground of desire, is beyond our grasp. Here Jung touches on something essential. For the psyche, meaning is not given by external answers. It is generated within, out of the dialogue between desire and order, between energy and form, between chaos and center. And this is exactly what the hymn of creation portrays. Let us imagine again the stillness before creation. There is no distinction yet. No light, no shadow. No birth, no death. Then comes desire, a ripple of vibration in the void. Then comes polarity, the separation of opposites, the tension of dualities. And then, out of the tension, order begins to arise. A pattern forms. A hidden law shapes the chaos. Cosmos is born. This pattern, Jung says, is the same in the human soul. We begin in unconscious unity. Then we are divided by opposites. Love and hate, fear and hope, ego and shadow. Desire awakens in us. The longing to know, to live, to grow. And through struggle, through sacrifice, through surrender, we slowly move toward a greater order. This order is never final. The psyche is not static. It is alive, dynamic, always balancing, always moving between chaos and structure. Just as the cosmos itself is not fixed. Stars are born and die. Galaxies expand and collapse. So too the human soul is ever evolving. And here lies the deepest mystery. The hymn admits that perhaps no one knows the origin. Even the gods may not know. For Jung, this confession is not weakness. It is strength. It reminds us that the essence of the psyche, like the essence of the cosmos, is ultimately unknowable. We can approach it with reverence, with symbols, with myth, but never with total certainty. And so, in the interplay of desire and order, in the dance of energy and form, we find both the mystery of the universe and the mystery of the soul. The hymn gives us its vision in cosmic language, and Jung translates it into psychological truth, that creation, both outer and inner, is born of longing, is shaped by sacrifice, and moves always toward order and wholeness, guided by a hidden principle that we may never fully comprehend. The hymn of creation ends not with certainty, but with a question. It asks, who knows? Who can truly say how it all began? Perhaps the highest gods know, or perhaps they do not. Perhaps the one who watches over all knows, or perhaps even he does not. This ending is unusual for an ancient hymn. Most sacred texts proclaim truth with authority. They tell us exactly how the world was made, and by whom. But here in this ancient song, we hear something different. We hear doubt, mystery, humility before the unknown. Carl Jung was deeply moved by this. He saw in it not weakness, but extraordinary wisdom. For the psyche itself, he said, is rooted in mystery. We can map its movements, we can describe its symbols, we can trace its patterns, but we cannot grasp its ultimate source. This recognition, that truth is wrapped in mystery, lies at the heart of individuation. Individuation, for Jung, is the process by which a person becomes whole. It is the integration of shadow and light, of conscious and unconscious, of masculine and feminine, of all the opposites that divide us. But individuation is not the possession of absolute truth. It is not about solving the riddle of existence once and for all. It is about living with mystery and finding meaning in the journey itself. The hymn's final question echoes this truth. Perhaps no one knows, perhaps even the gods do not. It is as if the ancient poets were reminding us that the deepest mysteries are not objects to be conquered. They are realities to be lived with. And Jung, across the centuries, hears this same voice, speaking from the unconscious. Do not demand certainty, it says. Do not cling to dogma. Instead, listen. Enter the mystery. Live the questions. Here we see the true kinship between the hymn of creation and Jung's psychology. Both remind us that to be human is to dwell in paradox. We long for answers, yet we live in uncertainty. We search for origins, yet the beginning may forever elude us. And perhaps this tension itself is what awakens the soul. Jung often said that the unconscious presents itself through symbols. But symbols are not solutions. They are bridges. They do not explain the mystery. They carry us into it. The hymn of creation with its questions and paradoxes, is itself a symbol, points towards something greater, something beyond thought, something that cannot be put into words. Now let us think of individuation again. When a person walks the path of individuation, they descend into the unconscious, they confront shadow, they wrestle with opposites, they endure sacrifice and renewal. And through this process, they are slowly guided toward the self. But what is the self? It is not something that can be defined once and for all. It is not a formula, not a fixed doctrine. It is a mystery, a center that cannot be fully seen, yet whose presence shapes every step of the journey. The hymn of creation tells us the same. It speaks of beginnings, yet refuses to give a final explanation. It names desire, sacrifice, polarity, order. Yet at the end it confesses, perhaps no one knows. In this confession, we find humility, but also depth. For to acknowledge the unknown is to open oneself to the infinite. Jung would often warn against the arrogance of thinking that psychology or science or philosophy could explain the soul completely. The psyche, he said, is larger than all our theories. It cannot be contained by concepts, can only be approached symbolically, experienced, and lived. This is why myths and hymns remain vital. They speak to what cannot be explained. They give form to what cannot be fully known. They let us feel the mystery, rather than attempt to solve it. And so the hymn ends where it began, in awe before the unknown, not with answers, but with questions, not with certainty, but with wonder. And Jung, reflecting on it, teaches us that this is also the destiny of individuation. To walk the path toward wholeness is to accept mystery as our companion. Consider your own life. How often have you searched for clarity, for certainty, for final answers? And how often has life answered you instead? With paradox, with contradictions, with mysteries you could not solve? Perhaps the point was never to solve them. Perhaps the point was to live with them, to let them shape you, transform you, and guide you toward a deeper wisdom. The hymn of creation whispers this lesson, and Jung's psychology echoes it. To live is to dwell in mystery. To become whole is not to know everything, but to reconcile ourselves with what cannot be known. The paradox is this: the more we accept not knowing, the closer we come to truth. The more we surrender our demand for certainty, the more open we become to the living presence of the self. And perhaps this is why the hymn ends with a question. It is not failure, it is wisdom. Thus, in the hymn of creation, we find a mirror of the psyche's deepest reality. Desire awakens, opposites divide, sacrifice shapes, order arises, and yet, beyond it all, there remains the unknown, the mystery that no mind can capture. This mystery is not our enemy, it is our teacher. It is the space where transformation happens. And so, we come to the end of the hymn of creation. We have journeyed with it through silence and void, through the stirring of desire, through the division of opposites, through sacrifice and order, and finally into the mystery of the unknown. But what does all of this mean for us today, so many centuries after the hymn was first sung? And why did Jung, a modern psychologist of the 20th century, find such deep significance in these ancient verses? The answer lies in Jung's central insight that myths are not only stories of the past, they are mirrors of the psyche. The hymn of creation is not merely about the origin of the cosmos. It is also about the origin of consciousness, the birth of the soul's awareness, the unfolding of individuation. Think of the hymn's great themes: the void before creation, the stirring of desire, the birth of opposites, the necessity of sacrifice, the rise of order, and the final embrace of mystery. Each of these is not only a cosmic truth, each is also a psychological truth. They describe the journey every human being must live. At the beginning of life, there is unconscious unity, the child immersed in a world without boundaries. Then comes desire, the longing to move outward, to know, to live, to grow. Then come the opposites, the conflicts of love and hate, joy and sorrow, hope and despair. Then comes sacrifice, the painful letting go of illusions, the death of the old self, so that something new may be born. Then comes order, a new harmony, a glimpse of wholeness, a sense of meaning, and finally mystery, the recognition that no matter how far we come, the ultimate truth remains beyond our grasp. For Jung, this is not failure. It is wisdom. The psyche itself teaches us through symbols that life is not about mastering all answers. It is about living the questions. It is about walking the path of individuation, step by step, allowing the unconscious to speak, allowing the opposites to unite, and finding meaning in the journey itself. This is why Jung saw the hymn of creation as more than poetry. He saw it as a psychological map, a symbolic description of the soul's unfolding. It begins in undifferentiated unconsciousness, then desire awakens, then opposites are born, then sacrifice is required, then order emerges, and finally mystery is embraced. Is this not also the path of individuation? Jung often spoke of the archetypes, the universal patterns of the unconscious, and in the hymn, we find many of them present. The archetype of the void, the archetype of desire, the archetype of sacrifice, the archetype of the self, appearing as cosmic order. These are not just ideas. They are living forces. They shape our dreams, our fantasies, our myth, our religions, and our lives. So what then is the message of the hymn? Seen through Jung's eyes, it is this, that the soul itself is a creation in progress, that each of us carries within the echo of the cosmic story, that our struggles, our desires, our sacrifices are not meaningless accidents, but part of a greater archetypal pattern, a drama as old as the universe itself. And perhaps this is why, even after thousands of years, the hymn still speaks to us, because it is not only about the gods, it is about us. It is about the mystery of our own lives. Consider how it ends, with a question, not an answer. This too is the message for us today. We live in an age that craves certainty, facts, proofs, final explanations. But the psyche does not give certainty. It gives symbols. It gives questions. It gives images that lead us deeper into mystery. And perhaps this is enough. For meaning does not come from having all the answers. It comes from living the story, from participating in the drama, from walking the path of individuation, with courage and humility. So let us hear the hymn again, not only as ancient poetry, but as the voice of the psyche. It says, "We are born from mystery. We are moved by desire. We are torn by opposites. We are shaped by sacrifice. We are guided toward order. And we live always in the presence of the unknown." This is the human journey. This is the way of transformation. This is the hymn of creation, not only of the cosmos, but of the soul. And so we have reached the end of this long journey, through Jung's reflections on the hymn of creation. From the silence of the void, to the spark of desire, to the birth of opposites, sacrifice, order, and mystery, we have seen how this ancient hymn still speaks to the soul today. If this exploration touched you, if it made you wonder, or open new questions in your own inner journey, then I invite you to stay connected. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss the next deep dive into Jungian psychology, archetypes, and the mysteries of the unconscious. I'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this story spoke most strongly to you? What mysteries are alive in your own life? Your reflections are part of this conversation too, and together we can explore deeper and deeper. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this journey. And until next time, stay curious, stay open, and keep listening to the voice of your soul.